On our last episode of Icons and Ideas, I interviewed Tony Robbins. And Tony Robbins had written a book where he got to interview 50 or more people in the world of finance. And in the middle of that interview, you might recall, I asked him, who was the person that impressed you the most of all the people you've interviewed for that book and the 50 people you interviewed from the first book? Now, mind you, you had Warren Buffett, Bogle, the list is endless of superstars. And he said, do you know Robert Smith? And I said, you got to be kidding me, because I do know Robert Smith, and he's the next person I'm interviewing for Icons and Ideas. And that's probably the best intro I can give to the founder and president and CEO and visionary of Vista. Perfect timing to have you on this podcast.
Peter, good to be here. Just a funny story about that. I get a chance to meet with wonderful people and exciting people all around the world. And I was talking to my wife. I said, Tony Robbins, that was the only one she got excited about.
That's the one my kids listen to.
Yeah, so it's mutual. So that's good.
Mutual admiration.
Yeah, well,
awesome.
Thanks for inviting me on the program. Excited to be here.
Well, so there are some of our viewers are more, generalists. This isn't the world that they live in. So, I obviously know your background and people in finance too, but can you got to share how you came into this, how you founded Vista, a little bit about your background. Well, and then I want to move quickly into everything happening today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's probably a helpful narrative to start with. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. Parents were both teachers, doctorates in education. So education was a big thing in our household and our family. My father and mother, again, were focused on, how are you going to make a difference in life? And to me, I learned, because I had a great internship at a place called Bell Laboratories, that the importance that technology was going to play, I'll really say, in our generation. It, of course, plays its role in every generation, every cycle. And as I evaluated, I had a great mentor who was a chemical engineer, and encouraged me to really think about that, because again, those were the modern day alchemists, and we were the ones who were able to convert one form of matter to another. So I decided to pursue a career in chemical engineering, and so I went to Cornell. And then worked in applied research and development. I earned a couple of patents and trade secrets and all that sort of thing, really looking and understanding the conversion dynamics of matter, which was actually very exciting for me. And then I learned about this thing called Wall Street. And what was interesting about that is how the world was valuing those who knew how to manage capital more so than those who knew how to manage, I'll call it, or labor in many respects. And so I then changed careers, went back to business school, then joined Goldman Sachs, worked in the M&A department, then I was asked to help start our tech group. So I was our first M&A banker on the ground in San Francisco, focused on technology. And it was funny, because at the time, 1997, people weren't quite sure what technology was going to be. It was a lot of defense contracting type of companies, Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman. And so when I went, it's like, well, why don't you pick up these companies? So I ended up with a little company called Apple Computer, and a little company called Hewlett Packard, and one called Yahoo, and one called eBay, and on down the line. And it turns out, of course, these companies started really reshaping the entire way that we as society interact, and how we engage with each other, and frankly how businesses become effective. And I realized there was a really interesting opportunity in the enterprise software, business-to-business software, because in my view, being you and I are both, I'll call it, technology, immigrants, not technology natives in many respects. We kind of got experienced in it in high school and some in college. That enterprise software is the most productive tool that's been introduced in our business economy over the last 50 years, and likely will be for the next 50. And I know we'll talk a bit about it. And I thought that would be an interesting place to then bring, call it, an engineer's mindset to the transformation of enterprise software companies. So that's what led to Vista, and the dynamic around how we do value creation in the work that we do across our portfolio companies. So that's what we do.
I mean, it's an incredible start, but at what moment in time did you realize I'm on the brink of running one of the most successful private equity firms on planet Earth? I mean, how far from the beginning, from where you're talking about it, to that moment where you realize that you're the dominant player in this specific space?
I always, it's funny, Peter, as an engineer, as a entrepreneur, as an optimist, you're always looking to the future. What are we doing? What's the work that we are doing? I don't necessarily look at the past and say, oh, wow, look what we got done. You look at that as to inform you as to what you need to be doing differently. I mean, even today, I'm wearing my Vista Agentic Labs. Well, what is the connotation of labs? it is a connotation of building something new that hasn't been, call it, discovered or built, to change the way that we do things. And so there's a constant evolution. So I wouldn't say at some point like, oh man, I made it. This is exciting to transform the way we as human beings interact on the planet, the way our businesses interact, the way our ecosystems evolve, and how technology enables that to happen. And I like being on the forefront of that. Yeah. Tip of the spear of change and dynamic. So I don't really think about it in the context of, oh man, I'm running this big organization.
There's no moment.
No, I think about it every day of let's go do, I just finished a whole series of meetings this morning. It's like, okay, so here's what we're doing here, and here's what we're doing here, and what are the elements that we need to augment? What are the things that we need to drive to continue to transform our businesses, faster and more effectively than anyone else in the marketplace, and enable our customers to leverage what is this new technology of artificial intelligence most effectively in their businesses. So that's what I'm focused on.
And when you and I talk, you talk about you're always in motion, like you're all over the place and in demand. Literally all over the country and all over the world. Yeah. We were just in Davos. What are the themes that are emerging? What are the world leaders thinking about? What are the key themes that came out of that?
So there's a couple, and they're in a couple different categories. Davos, I've been going, 10, 11 years, 12, maybe 12 years, I don't know what at this point. I'll tell you a funny story about that later as it relates to transformation and what that environment creates the opportunity for folks like myself. Last year, most of the conversation was around, will Europe have become investable? Because again, you have global investors here and global leaders in it. Right. This year, AI, of course, has been one of the major and central themes, but it got overshadowed by, I call it the geopolitical dynamics, and what is the intersection but between the two. Those are really, I call it the big themes that we're playing forward. I will point to a few things which I know we'll talk about that I think were most seminal, not on the geopolitical side, but on the AI side. And Satya Nadella had a wonderful interview, actually with Larry Fink, who's been on your show, I think. Right. And Satya talked about something. He said, not a lot of people are really talking about this, but this is probably one of the most important things to think about in the world of AI is, are you, these are my words, not his, leaching enterprise value out of your organization into these foundational models? And I've been telling our teams for years, the key is bring the model to the data, not your data to the model, okay? Because in essence, enterprise data, less than 1% of enterprise data actually exists in these foundational models and what they've been trained on, okay? And so if you have data in your infrastructure, in your company, in the industry, bringing the models and utilizing this technology to enable you to use that more effectively is going to create massive enterprise value. Mm-hmm. If you leach your data into those foundational models, you have now diffused a lot of enterprise value into other organizations. And so that's an important construct. And Satya was saying, this is something not a lot of people are talking about. It's one of the most important things we have to think about now that these models have become much more generally available in terms of how enterprises use it. Look, you and I as consumers, we've already leached our data, right? Okay, because we consume things in ways that others have access to, our preferences and the dynamics of how we want to engage with people or companies, et cetera. But in the enterprise, that isn't necessarily the case. Like I said, IBM put out a report that less than 1% of its enterprise data is actually part of these foundational models, which is a key and pivotal point for enterprises to maintain their viability going forward is to bring, again, these models to their data, not their data to the models.
We were talking a lot about business software and subscription-based services. Can you give an example of any company, whether it's in your portfolio or not, just so our listeners that aren't into this as much have a sense of what are we even talking about?
Sure. B2B software, we call enterprise. These are business systems. And so you take insurance, for instance. If you are an insurance company, pick it. There's ways that they underwrite a property and casualty insurance claim, or the ways they underwrite a life insurance policy, or there are ways that they manage a claim for any of these things. It's the software that governs the workflows around, you live in, Palo Alto, California, you have a house of this size and you want to underwrite, they need to underwrite, a fire policy or whatever it might be. There's certain rules and regulations, which may be federal and state in many places, that live within the policy management systems. There's all, of course, this, who you are, your name and all that kind of stuff, but there's the ways that they have to underwrite so that when you are getting an insurance policy and your neighbor is getting one, they have to be, underwritten the same, as opposed to, probabilistically different, right? And like I always like to say, and that's why these models, these LLM models, if you think about them, the way that they were built on this whole transformer technology is they are probabilistic, not deterministic. Enterprise software gives you deterministic outcomes. You have a repeatability to those outcomes, as opposed to it's mostly right. I'm sure you'd be upset if your wire transfers for your paycheck is mostly right.
Right.
I'm sure you want it
Good example.
to be exactly right. Right? It's that dynamic. So you start that and start to apply that across the infrastructure of business. Businesses don't want to be mostly right. Okay, they need deterministic outcomes, and so how you build and take probabilistic efficiencies into deterministic outcomes is part of what leads to what I call the Vista Agentic Factory.
So this was such a hot part. Obviously, tech companies were hot, and then this kind of subscription-based enterprise software is like the hottest, because I think, speaking from my point of view, investors like this, kind of recurring revenue and built-in price adjustments, and goes on forever, and big moat around it. And of course, this week the markets have been shook, right? Because we're seeing, these announcements around AI and all this, the threat it has to subscription-based software, and is the barrier to entry going to come way down? We're seeing private credit funds down 20% that may have a lot of their lending in this space. We're seeing companies like Oracle, Salesforce, Palantir 30, 40, 50% down. What is happening? You might be the number one person in the world to ask this question to right now. What do you think is happening?
Yeah, a lot of it is people aren't informed as to what is actually occurring in the world of agentic enterprise software. Look, everybody paints things with a broad brush. Oh, gee, how did this all come about? You had one of the big LLM providers issue a new code product that says, oh, I can now enable legal, analysis and systems. And as a result of that, everyone who had enterprise software in and around kind of, the Westlaws and the LexisNexis, and then that kind of spreads and like, oh, gee, this is going to eliminate the need for those businesses. Well, on the one hand, what you have to realize is the bulk of the information, okay, that is in the legal constructs like an NDA and those sort of, that's already out there. It's already part of these learning management tools. You see what I mean? There isn't anything necessarily proprietary about, NDAs and NDA constructs and, preparing a brief, etc. This is a tool that is a productivity tool that in some respects doesn't have the proprietary, I call it, workflows and data sets that an enterprise software system has for underwriting an insurance claim. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
But it gets painted all with the same broad brush. Oh, gee, the death of enterprise software as a result of an introduction of a plugin in essence for one of the LLMs. Again, less than 1% of this enterprise data actually these models have been trained on. You see what I mean? So that's the dynamic that you're seeing, and as a result, you get broad-based sell-off. Look, we've seen this over time. You probably remember when they're, this on-prem to SaaS. Oh, SaaS or this cloud is going to be the death of software. Well, what did it do? It actually spurred the largest boom of enterprise software in history. This is likely going to be larger because I call it the economic impact for those that become agentic is actually higher. Let me give you an example. If you look now, what shook people is this ARR dynamic, terminal value. Oh, I have a customer who now pays me money to use this, a seat, a license, and they're going to use it forever. And so I'm going to underwrite, okay, my investment based on it being
never going to leave. There's
never going to leave.
The cost of switch is too high. It's such a hassle.
Right. And a lot of that continues to be very true. Here's the difference, okay? If I am using one of our agentic systems, agentic being an agent operates within these workflows, the economic value of that utilization is orders of magnitude greater than the seat license. But there haven't been enough proof points in the marketplace for people to see that. And actually, there's reports, Bain just came out with a report, BCG came out with a report, it's like the TAM, total addressable market, in the BCG report, $1 trillion of increase, $1 trillion of increase to application providers who are going to deliver this to the enterprise. The question people are asking is, well, AI native companies have access to this more so than what we'll call those who already are participants in the industry. That's really going to be a function, Peter, of, I call it the sovereignty and dominion of the workflows and data sets. Because the AI native companies don't have necessarily the context. They don't have the data. They don't have the policy management information that's been built up in with the workflows within companies. You're not going to take an agent and just drop it into an environment and get a series of probabilistic outcomes. Okay, take a 93% times 93% times 93% as it goes through a workflow. That's not going to give you a deterministic outcome. Okay, so those who actually are in possession of, I call it the sovereignty and dominion of the workflows and the data sets, have the greatest advantage, but you have to take advantage of that by innovating AI enablement, agentic enablement of what is your incumbent advantage in that environment.
So I understand that. So that in some systems, definitely feel a lot less vulnerable hearing you talk about this. That people have businesses have put so much into the program itself that they're so invested in it that even if that's something else, the data's in the wrong place. Tell me about like a system like a lot of restaurants use Toast, right?
Yeah.
Which is, hey, we, basically, you beat your server, they show up, they put your order into Toast, and it keeps track of their inventory, and they don't run the credit card processing and all of that. And the barrier to, the restaurant doesn't want to switch, even if they could save a few bucks, because they got to retrain everybody, get new equipment. But if a competitor can come in and create something like Toast very quickly at very low cost, does that narrow the moat? I mean, is there vulnerability in that?
It depends. So I like to say enterprise software, again, business software, will end up in one of three categories. Okay, I call it agentic, rule of 70. So remember the rule of 40 was a golden rule in enterprise software. That's a combination of growth rate and EBITDA margin, right? So if you're growing at 15%, 25% EBITDA margin, rule of 40, that's a really good enterprise software company. Or the third category is no right to exist. Okay, and if all of your data, okay, and your workflows exist outside of your enterprise, you may not have a right to exist. Okay, so you take a company like you mentioned, and you say, well, gee, is there something there that's proprietary, or is it just access to the website or access to the booking information that is proprietary? Okay, and maybe it isn't. And so in that case, you say, well, an AI native company, probably in that case, it's a consumer business, as you know, because it's a consumer who's now wants to use this. That's not really a B2B.
Yes.
Okay.
Good point. Yeah.
All right. But if I'm actually managing a transfer between two banks, or if I'm managing a settlement of a claim between one institution and another, that is a B2B interaction that occurs, okay? Or some supply chain dynamic that there's, okay, here's the rules, and okay, we've got some tariff dynamic if you're buying this part in Portugal and it's gonna transfer through the UK and end up in Tennessee. There's a set of rules there that no one has outside of those enterprises, right? So it's gonna be hard to put an agent in that environment that will figure that out all the time, because you may need it in Memphis and it says I'm going to put it in Nashville because it's probabilistic, right? That's a simple example, but those are the dynamics of importance of having real context, real workflows, real dynamic data. Because remember, this isn't just static data, it's dynamic data that is informed by the activities and the way the businesses interact.
So this is interesting because we're talking about enterprise software, and obviously that's the headlines today is what's happening in this space. So the headline that's persistent, that's happening like all year now, is what jobs are going to be safe, what's not going to be safe, what do I need to do, how do I survive? And what is your take on what should the average American be thinking about, right? Like what major should my kid get in school? And if I'm a young person, what talent set should I be working on? And what may exist and what may not exist in the future?
Great question. Starting at the high level, often there's a conflation of software versus enterprise software and consumer software. Two different things.
Right.
Okay, so that's kind of one of the first things to actually think about. And that has some implications as to where the opportunity sets exist. So that's kind of point one. Point two, kind of getting to it, services in the enterprise world are multiples of software. Okay, so if you're utilizing a software solution, the services are often the people who are working on it or the provision, and often that's a multiple. What AI enables enterprise software to do is to eat services. Okay, so I'll give you an example, a real-time example of one of the companies that we own, and we've implemented one of our agentic solutions in where there was an outsourcer doing a body of work. They had about 100 or so people doing that body of work, and one of our customers was paying that outsourcer to do that work. We have agentified that entire piece of business. As a result of that, while they were paying us $2,000 per seat, $250,000 in essence that they were paying us annual ARR.
Right.
By agentifying this in that environment, we now can capture the entire value of that outsourced contract, which was a $5 million contract with some upside indicators. So we go from $250,000 to $2.5 million plus some upside. 10x expansion of TAM because the AI enabled our enterprise software to eat the services.
Right.
That's a real-time activity that's occurring now, okay? So that just gives you some context as to how TAM expands by AI enabling a company that has unique workflows, unique data sets for that particular industry to now go eat parts of that services. So when you say, okay, well, what should we be thinking about as workers in America and workers around the world? If you are providing a series of I'll use the word low-level tasks that can be automated by an agent, those businesses will be affected. In some cases, the individual who is using AI can actually displace their coworkers. Okay. In some cases, the businesses may decide, well, there's a fully automated system. I don't need anyone who does that. So those are the dynamics that are going to actually play out in the marketplace over coming months, quarters, and years. Because now that we are building these agentic solutions and actually seeing them come to fruition where they are working in a deterministic fashion, not in a probabilistic fashion, we can now, and which is what we're doing, delivering this. We have over 30 of our 90 companies that are now have gone through our agentic engine, or our agentic factory. They now have agentic solutions, hundreds of thousands of agents deployed, and our agents are highly efficient and effective at managing specific tasks, and in some cases, orchestrated tasks.
So you built this whole thing. You definitely think in systems and that's very clear from talking. Everything's a system and a process and repeatable. Do you use your gut at all, intuition at all, as you think about businesses, investments, or do you ignore that part completely?
You have to take that into account, of course. I like to say my gut or my intuition is informed by repeated fact patterns. Okay? So what we've done, just to give you some context and give your audience some context, we have 90 or so software companies. We've done one large designed experiment over the last 2.5, 3 years when this got introduced. We have some great relationships, Microsoft, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google, that have enabled us to test and evaluate different forms of utility of this new technology. Often we get the code released early. To give an example for Anthropic and code generation, to answer part of the other question, years ago, people come in, Robert, what should my son or daughter study? I'm like, to write code. Wrong answer. To utilize AI to now write code. Why? Because when we look at what has now come out of part of our agentic factory, we're getting 80% plus productivity in code generation utilizing these tools. Okay, so what's that enable us to do? Reduce our cost of production dramatically, or increase our output dramatically in terms of what we actually want to deliver in solutions to our customers. That's just an example. We can get that, my gut gets informed by us trying that across 90 different companies. Okay, let's use this code base here, let's use that one here, what did we learn? What did we evaluate? This works extremely well in this context. And I could say with fact, because we just had a review, with the exception of one code base we found, we get that same sort of automated, I'll call it improvement, and then we just replicate that across our portfolio companies. Okay, but a year and a half, and we're like, yeah, we think it's going to be effective, but now we're informed by it. So when we're underwriting a new company, we know exactly what we can do. So I call it informed gut. is a way to proceed.
More informed than gut. It sounds like.
Yeah, for sure.
You still lean on it a little bit.
Yeah.
So you've been through some of the biggest bear markets of all time. 08, 09, 9/11, tech bubble. We had recent smaller ones like tariffs and so on. How do you get the organization through those? What do you see in the future, if anything, or you find it completely unpredictable?
Organizational design is, I think, critically important in leading through change. You've got organization design around, the infrastructure around Vista. One of the most important pieces of that is our value creation team. Our value creation team has to constantly evolve because we're ingesting new technology all the time. Okay, early days, mainframe, client server, on-prem, cloud, and now this new thing called AI. Okay, machine learning preceded that, AI, now Gen AI. Each of those, you actually have to have an organization that not only evolves to ingest this new technology, but has a capability to then diffuse it into however many portfolio companies that you have, and also inform your investment team on how to now underwrite utilizing these new fact patterns and new capabilities that we've now learned. So that's why that is so important, the organizational design of what we do for the underwriting and then the diffusion of technology. And then working with your portfolio companies to understand that change is not only good, but it's necessary. Okay, and that's the thing. A lot of people think, oh, you build it this one way and it should be like that forever. No, in the world of technology, in the world of software, you have to understand you are in a constant state of evolution. So you have to build your organization so it can constantly evolve. And that evolution isn't an anathema to your being. It is an essential part of you being able not only to survive, but to thrive in those environments. So that's organizational design is one of the most important things that you have to focus on, at least in our business, where you have a constant change in the substrate of what it is that you do, and that's technology.
So you sound like hyper involved in the discipline. You use the words discipline and excellence a lot, over and over again. Did you come to conclude those are the two most important things over time? Was there an aha moment? These are two words that come up a lot when you're talking.
A lot, it kind of, the early question about my background and all of that. I grew up in a world of technology, semiconductor testing at a place called Bell Laboratories. Yeah. Think about that, 30 plus years ago. Yeah. Okay, what were we looking to do and looking to accomplish? It was to deliver high quality, repeatable, in that case, is communication systems, okay, that could then be proliferated around the world, that has to have a reliability associated with them, certainty, okay, repeatability. And so that's a framework. And when you move into a world of chemical engineering, what are you doing? Okay, we are creating processes at scale that can't be mostly right. They have to be deterministically right. Okay, so the only way to do that is to constantly have, I call them feedback and feed forward loops built into the design of what it is that we do. And from an investor perspective, I think that's the best way to get scale and get output at scale. Look, you're not going to get it all right, okay? But if you build systems that will give you the ability to manage that, I call it those virtuous cycles effectively, over the long run, you will be able to deliver consistent results at scale.
It sounds like, so from an investment perspective, you think a lot about repeatable process, deterministic, repeatable process. What advice would you have to an investor? Obviously, that's part of it. Invest in businesses that have a clear path that.
Besides invest with Vista, or
right. Besides that, besides that,
yeah.
Just as they look at a company, what should they be thinking about?
Yeah, so there's elements of this, and again, if you're saying, if you're not an investing world, you're a dentist, a doctor.
Yeah.
First thing is the whole dollar cost averaging if you're going to play the public markets.
Right.
Okay. Then you have to look at, well, where does innovation come from? Okay. And so in the world, like I said, enterprise software is the most productive tool introduced in our business economy over the last 50 years. Well, guess what? Those companies, 96% of those companies are private. So you don't have access to that.
I don't think people realize this. There used to be 8,000 publicly traded companies. Now
2,500.
there's 4,000. Is it 25? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you look at the world's gone private. It just
Right.
it has.
Yeah, and not only gone private, well, look at all of the innovation today that's coming out. There's only a couple of those companies that actually are public.
Right.
Okay? Right? If you think about it, okay? The rest are private. Some are looking to go public. Some are saying, I don't want to stay private forever, right? That's the dynamic. And so a lot of that, remaining private often gives you the ability to be more nimble. And in periods of rapid change, speed does matter.
Yeah.
Okay? It isn't necessarily going to be the thing that gives you the long-term moat, but getting there fast first in some markets really will matter. The dilemma that has hit the market of late is, oh wow, these AI native companies are going to disintermediate a lot of these, the word incumbent, because a lot of the incumbents don't move nimbly enough. And adopting the technology and then proving, of course, the proof points in the marketplace as to, here we've converted seats to agents and the TAM is 1.5 or 10x what a seat TAM was. Okay, but once you go through, I call it these messy middles, you go through these J curves. We saw those same J curves when we went from on-prem to cloud. Remember, every company is, oh man, we're going to a SaaS model, and all of a sudden their market cap gets hit, and then all of a sudden their market cap does this because they're going through the transition. We're in something similar and a little more profound. Okay, there is the change in the business model of on-prem to cloud, maintenance to subscription, which created a little bit of that difference. This is a different thing because it actually enables a TAM expansion. Okay, not just terminal value evaluation, a TAM expansion is saying, guess what?
For some of our listeners, TAM, explain.
Yeah, total addressable market.
Right.
Okay, so as I talked about, that bits, AI enabling enterprise software to eat services.
Yes.
Okay, right. It's that, because all of a sudden you now can expand your market and do some things. Okay, and take economic rent from another part of the market that you otherwise didn't have access to, beyond just making yourself more productive, like you do in writing code more efficiently. Okay, so beyond the writing code more efficiently, a la our profit margins can go up. You now have the ability to say, guess what? I can now go, I call it, eat other industries or other dollars share that's being spent someplace else. And in some cases, it is labor. In some cases, it's the services. In some cases, it's an outsourced services. In some cases, it's enabling a completely different market. Some cases, it's offsetting. Like one of our companies that we've now enabled, it's a highly complex for the government services. So we have 4,800 state, municipal, local governments as customers. There's about 7 million people who are retiring over the next couple of years out of these who are answering phones and doing things. And so we have our customers like, well, what are we going to do about this? Because we don't have necessarily new entrants coming in, people, to take these jobs. Well, we have created agentic systems that are now doing that, and they are working extremely well because we know how to get deterministic outcomes in the way that we built our factory in those environments. And so that's going to solve some retirement problems for certain industries. So that's what I mean. Those are the dynamics that each of our agentic systems addresses different needs in the marketplace, and to what those end use cases are.
Do you think this is a market where, hey, everything's going AI technology and there's a lot of clarity about what sector and companies to buy, or do you think it's just so dangerous that innovation is happening so rapidly that we're going to be, like you just said, you can't be right all the time, right? That the creative destruction of capitalism is happening so quickly because of the advancements in technology that you just kind of have to have your eggs spread out in different baskets, because no matter what bet you're on, who knows, we can't predict what's going to happen. How do you see this?
I get asked that question in that form and in different forms, in different ways. And I like to share, again, a perspective around that. I was asked that question last week at a conference, and I said, the way I would do it, if I wasn't doing it, I would look to see who, first of all, is taking a systemic approach to understanding change, and how that systemic approach is informing them to make decisions on where to go and how to then make their investments. if you're relying on singular instances of a management team figuring it out, that isn't necessarily the best way to do it, in my view. I think you want to look for a group or person or individuals or company or firm that says, okay, we're going to look at a number of ways to do it and the different permutations because it's all changing. That's why I call it a designed experiment. Okay? And then from that, come up with different, I call them archetypes of what can be successful. You know, in our case, now we've 90 portfolio companies looked at every different model and trying a different, we have a couple different archetypes that agentic solutions will look like. There is a, I call it the constant always on archetype. So this is a monitoring system that agentic, so if you have people now monitoring systems and now you create agents that are monitoring systems, high volume, not necessarily that complex, but it's a high volume solution set that has an economic dynamic associated with it that enables you to do some things at a speed and pace that you couldn't in other cases. I talked about the government example, and that one, it's kind of, if you go to your state and local government, you're doing everything from snow removal to potholes to DMV or whatever. It's complex. And so that has a different agentic profile than something that I'm going to do something highly specialized.
Right.
And that highly specialized requires, a series of agents to be orchestrated and monitored and maintained and reporting out to meet regulatory or, or compliance requirements. Each of those are different states. And so I think you look for an organization that has evaluated a wider, call it aperture of challenge, and has said, listen, here's how you now create cohorts of opportunity to increase your probability of success.
I think that I couldn't agree more that different spaces require different game plan.
Right.
You got to be in different spaces with different game plans.
Right.
What do you think about people who say, like when we're watching the markets now get hit, these subscription-based service companies, tech companies get hit very hard, but now we're seeing like ExxonMobil is soaring because people go, well, these are the companies that are safe. What do you think about this idea that there's companies that AI is not coming for? I mean, do you think it's coming for everything? It's a matter of degrees, or are there really spaces where you go, you know what, we could probably just count on this to be here 10 years from now, the way it is today? Because that's what the market's telling us today.
Yeah,
Do you agree with
Peter,
that?
look, you and I have been at this for a while. If you take a snapshot today and say, okay, what companies are in the S&P 500? Now go back 20 years and say, well, what companies are in the S&P 500? Now go back 20 years, okay, how many of them from two of those iterations are on that S&P 500? Everything changes, okay? We as human beings change, okay, and our consumptive patterns change. Like today, everyone said, oh, well, there was a massive demand for energy. And so it was, I'm going to go invest in energy companies. Well, what kind of energy? Okay, because when you ultimately electrify the U.S. to support all of the things, do you need the same level of consumption around petrochemicals?
Right.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Right.
I think of like Ozempic's a great example.
Yeah.
Like now the airlines are saying their cost of fuel is going to go down, and Frito-Lay's, going, oh my God, what happened?
Right.
Like you just never know.
That's part of the fun of life too, right? It is things are going to change. What you want to do, I think, is find and associate yourself and your investments with people who are becoming deeply informed about how changes are going to affect the areas of their expertise and their dominion. I think that's the most important thing. There is no set it and forget it, okay, type of market. Mm-hmm. In my mind, there is no kind of set it and forget it type of environment in investing. I mean, it is going to constantly change because needs, preferences, consumptive patterns, geopolitical dynamic, all of that all changes. Because that is great until somebody decides, well, we're not going to buy from that country anymore.
Right.
Okay? Things change.
Yeah.
And so, again, making sure that not only are you working with people who are informed and curious, but also bringing to bear rigorous analytical capabilities to understanding the potential impact of those changes, I think is the right way to approach it.
I mean, I really feel for the individual investor today because, they just like, I don't even know what degree to get. Everyone told me to code. Now code's the most expendable thing. And what job is going to go away? I was speaking at one of the largest law firms in the world recently, and the CEO got up before me and said, 80% of you aren't going to have a job. I couldn't believe what he was saying. Like,
Yeah.
the world is just moving so fast. It's
Because what he was really saying is 20% of you who use AI will actually replace the others.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah.
All right, I got to ask about Morehouse. I know you get this question all the time.
Yeah, sure.
By the way, this is a world with a lot of sharp edges. If you have not seen this video and you want your day to be uplifted, just Google this. So you're doing the commencement address there at Morehouse University, and I'm dying to know the answer to this. It felt to me like you were doing this on the fly. Did you plan it in advance? So you just declared that we're gonna pay for everybody's student debt. Do I have the story right? I mean, tell me about this.
Yeah.
Like how you arrived at this and what you've learned from it and kind of what came back to you.
What you probably learned in this conversation and meetings before is I don't do anything I haven't worked on and planned.
All right, that's true. That's true. There's no chance you would actually know.
So, a year before I was invited, and just long story short, I was invited to Morehouse to receive as an award called Candle in the Dark Awards, pretty prestigious award there. And in that, I started to really understand more about the student body and the students, the opportunities and challenges, and then I call it the grit of those individuals. And I'm a person who likes people who believe in themselves and say, I'm going to bet on myself. And you think about a student loan, there's no greater indication I'm betting myself than I'm taking on debt to now go better my condition. And so when you kind of hear that and you see that and you meet these students, like, this is interesting, and they say, would you come do this commencement address? I said, sure. I do a bunch in scholarships and all those sort of bunch of different places. But a scholarship is, hey, I'm betting on you.
Yes.
Okay, and they may or may not realize that potential. But someone says, man, not only am I betting on myself, but I also paid off the Parent Plus loans for the parents or grandparents as well.
Wow.
Because now they have bet on that next generation. And I think that's quite admirable. And I'm like, okay, so let me give you a little fuel in your bus, because you bet on yourself, and now let me enable a part of that bet, to now be realized, to say, now let's alleviate some burden. Now let's go see what you can do. And so that's what the dynamic is about.
Did it feel the way you thought it would feel when you were doing it?
It's interesting. I don't want to say I didn't think that much about it, because I was away with my wife and children, and I said, okay, I'm gonna go do this and I'll be back. And she's like, okay, great. So I go and I don't actually go through the procession. I walk off the stage and go get in the car, and then I go fly to my family, and my phone's ringing and this and that, and I get back to the house and I'm like, what is going on here? And all of a sudden I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. It
gave a lot of people hope.
Yeah, a lot of impact. It was kind of interesting. And then it's funny, anywhere I go around the world now, anywhere I go, I will literally get picked up by a driver going to a meeting. It's like, I want to just say thank you. I know it doesn't affect me personally, but that was just a wonderful thing that you did. I was like, wow. So it had an impact. People like hope in this world.
They do. I know you're very philanthropic. Do you bring this kind of same discipline, repeatable process, excellence to philanthropy? Are you more hands-off? How do you?
It depends. In areas, in many cases, I like to bring what I call impact and scale. To what I do. And a lot of it is, I call it to uplift the human spirit, and again, it is that, to uplift the human spirit. There's things I do in outdoor education, because how I grew up in Colorado, that uplift the human spirit. Music, you may or may not, I'm chairman of Carnegie Hall, and how we now get to over, 800,000 school kids a year through our programs, right? To me, that uplifts the human spirit and, connects us a lot as humanity, and understand, I call it this great world that we have a chance to participate in and be in, and the humanity is an important part of what we do, that we should enforce every day in everything that we do.
And so in all of your giving and all the different things that you do, for people that feel locked out, what is your advice to them that they control it? No one else can do it for them. You can't do it for them. No other philanthropist can do it for them. What is it that they have to own that they can do to propel themselves forward?
Optimism and intention. Okay, having an optimistic view on who you are and what you can go accomplish.
So let go of the bitterness and anger.
All of it. Okay, be optimistic. Okay.
Yeah.
Second thing is actually be very focused on creating intentions. Intentions that you can actualize, first through your mind, second through your words, and then third through your actions. Okay, it's one of those.
Yeah.
Don't say, oh, I want to do this, but your actions are counter to that. Okay, you have to be consistent in that, and ultimately that creates a nice, I call it a nice, flow that helps lead to some great outcomes for yourself.
Well, Robert, this was a blink of an eye, but one of my favorite
Oh, this was fun,
episodes
Peter.
yet. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, pleasure.